Hello, Year 9. I hope that you had a great weekend and I hope that you are looking forward to coming back to school. Today we are going to continue reading Romeo and Juliet. The reason that we're not doing our normal library lesson on the Monday is because you are going to be assessed on Romeo and Juliet this term. So it's very important that we keep the pace going and we keep ploughing through the text. And that's what we're going to do today. So, as always, could you please pause the video and copy down the title, the date, and the learning objective. Pause the video and complete this now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you are ready to complete the do now task. As always, I want you to answer the following questions in full sentences based on your knowledge of the text so far. Pause the video and come back when you have those sentences completed, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to make your purple pen corrections. Give it a tick if you got it right. If you got it wrong, please make sure you write the correct answer. So, Friar Lawrence is shocked and concerned about the sincerity of Romeo's love for Juliet, as he worries that he's only just said that he loves Rosaline and now also loves Juliet. It is Tybalt who challenges Romeo to a duel. Mercutio laughs at the thought of a lovesick Romeo duelling a violent Tybalt. They're not a match. Romeo's friends tease him about his love for Rosaline, unaware that he is in love with a Capulet. And the nurse has been looking for Romeo to find out the details about where and when Juliet is to meet him. Pause the video and make any purple pen corrections that you need to now, please. Okay, so before we get into it, let's read a brief summary of Act 2, Scene 5. Now, 3 hours after sending the nurse for news from Romeo, Juliet waits impatiently for her return. The nurse, knowing of how eager and keen Juliet is to hear the news, deliberately teases the young bride-to-be by withholding the word of the upcoming wedding. The nurse finally gives in when Juliet is almost hysterical with frustration and tells her that she is to marry Romeo that afternoon at Friar Lawrence's cell. The nurse then leaves to collect the rope ladder that Romeo will use to climb into Juliet's bedroom that night. Now, this scene is a really, really important scene, and that is because it slows the pace of the play down. As a playwright, you have to kind of craft your text in order to give the audience moments to breathe, kind of come to terms with the information that's happened so far, go to the toilet, have a break, and this is one of those scenes. It slows the pace of the play down, and that also works to build tension as we wait for the wedding. So let's read. Juliet begins with a soliloquy, which is an extended speech on stage, regardless of hearers. So it's normally either on their own or someone else is on stage, but that person can't hear. That is a soliloquy. The clock struck 9 when I did send the nurse. In half an hour she promised to return. Perchance you cannot meet him. That's not so. So she's saying, I sent the nurse at 9 o'clock. Maybe she can't find him. It can't be. She's just stressing. She doesn't know where the nurse is. And then she blames the nurse and says, oh, she is lame, saying, oh, she's just too slow. She says, love's herald should be thought, which 10 times faster glides than the sunbeams, driving back shadows over lowering hills. Therefore do nimble-pinioned doves draw love, and therefore hath the wind swift Cupid wings. She says that love's messengers should be thoughts which fly 10 times faster than the sunbeams. They should be strong enough to push shadows over the dark hills. That's the way that the doves carry Venus so fast, and that's why Cupid has wings that let him fly as fast as the wind. So she's using a lot of kind of imagery of love here, you know, the idea of a dove who carries Venus, the idea of Cupid and Cupid's wings, you know, this romantic language reflects her feelings of romance. She says, now is the sun upon the highmost hill of this day's journey, and from 9 till 12 is 3 long hours, yet she is not come. She's basically saying that it has been 3 hours and she hasn't come back yet. And this is the kind of concept of time here. The time is really slow and painful for Juliet. Juliet says, had she affections and warm, youthful blood, she would be as swift in motion as a bull. She's basically moaning that the nurse is too old, and if she was young and she was passionate, like Juliet is, she would move as fast as a bull. And that simile there kind of indicates Juliet's youthful energy and how it contrasts with the nurse, who is slow and old. And this youthful energy and this enthusiasm to hear from her lover is developed throughout, and the contrast with the nurse is also developed. Juliet continues by saying, my words would bandy her to my sweet love and his to me. My words would bounce her to my sweet love, and his word would bounce hers back to me. So her being this ball that is thrown between Juliet and Romeo to pass on those messages. Bold folks, many fain as they were dead, unwieldy, slow, heavy, and pale as lead. And she basically says a lot of old people act like they're dead, sluggish, slow, fat, and colourless like lead. And again, that's a continuation of this contrast between Juliet and the nurse. And it's also quite sad, really. You know, the nurse earlier on was expressing how much she cared for Juliet and how she'd almost raised Juliet as her own, and Juliet's almost forgotten about that in the face of her new love. So the nurse enters with Peter, who is the nurse's personal servant. And Juliet exclaims, oh God, she comes! Oh honey nurse, what's new? Hast thou met with him? Send thy man away. So instantly she says, oh my God, she's here. Oh sweet nurse. Which again is quite interesting, because she's honestly just been calling her old and fat and useless for the last however long. She says, what news do you bring? Have you seen him? And then she demands, send thy man away, get rid of Peter. And the nurse says, Peter, stay at the gate. Juliet says, now, good sweet nurse, O Lord, why look'st thou so sad? Thou news be sad, yet tell them merrily. If good, thou shamest the music of sweet news by playing it to me with so sour a face. She recognises instantly that the nurse looks sad, and she says, look, whatever the news is, tell me with a happy face. And if the news is good, you're ruining the music of this sweet news by telling it to me with a sour face, looking sad. And this, reference to music of sweet news is kind of like Juliet thinking this is music to her ears. She wants to know the plan to be with Romeo, and that is music to her ears. The nurse says, I am a-weary, give me leave a while. Fie, how my bones ache, what a jaunts have I! So this is where the nurse begins to tease Juliet. She withholds the information that Juliet so longs to hear, and continues this joke about how old she is and how tired she is from her day. She basically just saying, leave me alone, my bones are aching, and I've been running all over the place. Juliet says, I wouldst thou hadst my bones, and I thy news. Nay, come, I pray thee speak, good nurse, speak. She basically says, I wish you had my bones and I had your news. So she's like, shh, let's just get to the news. Then she says, come on now, I beg you, I pray thee, speak, nurse, speak. And the repetition of the word speak here and the words good in this kind of ungrammatical phrase shows her excitement and almost her kind of giddy frustration. Nurse says, Jesu, what haste! Can you not stay a while? Do you not see that I am out of breath? She goes, Jesus, you're in such a hurry. Can't you just chill for a moment? Don't you see that I'm out of breath? Like, let me relax. Obviously, this is probably frustrating Juliet even more. Juliet says, how art thou out of breath when thou hast breath to say to me that thou art out of breath? She's like, how can you be out of breath when you have enough breath to tell me that you're out of breath? She's getting very frustrated at this point. The excuse that thou dost make in this delay is longer than the tale thou dost excuse. She says, the excuse that you're making to delay telling me the news is actually just longer than if you would tell me the news anyway. And she says, is thy news good or bad? Answer to that. Say either, and I'll stay the circumstance. Let me be satisfied. Is it good or bad? She says, answer my question. Tell me the news. Is it good or bad? Now, this is where you have to consider whether this is a childish outburst from Juliet. She's only 13, she's fallen in love, she's kind of managing these childish, giddy emotions, or is this her becoming a woman? Is she distancing from her childhood as she speaks to the nurse in this rude and abrupt manner? And this is a kind of theme that continues throughout the text, kind of young versus old, youth versus age. And Juliet seems to be occupying a space between the two. The nurse says, well, you have made a simple choice. You know not how to choose a man. Romeo, no, not he. He said, nurse kind of concedes at this point, but she's still going to kind of play with Juliet a little bit. She says, well, you have made a simple choice. You've made a foolish choice. You didn't know better than to pick a man of Romeo. And she says, no, not he. Though his face be better than any man's, yet his leg excels all men's. And for a hand and a foot and a body, though they be not to be talked on, yet they are past compare. He is not the flower of courtesy, but I'll warrant him as gentle as a lamb. Go thy ways, wench, serve God. What have you dined at home? She says, no, not him. Though his face is very handsome, his legs are better than all the other men's, and same for his hands and his feet, and his body, well, they're past compare, they're beyond compare. He's not the most polite man in the world, flower of courtesy, but he's gentle as a lamb. And then she asks Juliet, have you had lunch yet? Juliet says, no, but all this did I know before? What says he of our marriage? What of that? She's like, no, I haven't had lunch, and everything you told me about him, I know, because I love him. So tell me what he said about marriage. Tell me what he wants. And now this is where the nurse introduces this kind of bawdy sexual sense of humour, very similar to that of Mercutio and that of some of the other men. She deems love as purely physical. We've seen Mercutio talk about women and women's body parts and the acts of sexual intercourse and that process in a similar fashion to how the nurse is talking about the physicality of Romeo, and therefore how he is a suitable husband for Juliet. So the idea that love is purely physical. And the nurse again continues winding her up and says, Lord, how my head aches. What a head I have. It beats as it would fall in 20 pieces. My back at the other side. Ah, my back. Beshrew your heart for sending me about to catch my death with jauncing up and down. Moaning about her headache and her back pain. And then she says, curse you, beshrew you for sending me running all over the town. I could get sick and die from doing this. I could catch my death from jauncing, from running. Juliet says, I faith I am sorry that thou art not well. Sweet, sweet, sweet nurse, tell me what says my love. At this point, she's begging. She says, look, I'm really sorry you're in pain, but just, please, nurse, please tell me, what is he saying? The nurse says, your love says, like an honest gentleman, and courteous, and kind, and a handsome, and I warrant a virtuous. Where is your mother? She says at this point, he's an honourable gentleman, he's courteous, he's kind, he's handsome, and I think that he's virtuous. And then she asks where his mother. So the nurse is almost kind of, it's like giving candy from a baby almost. She's like dangling these glimpses of Romeo and her opinions of Romeo and what may have happened in the conversation. And then she asks these questions like, have you had lunch? Where is your mother? To tease Juliet even further. Juliet says, where is my mother? Why, she is within. Where should she be? How oddly thou repliest. Your love says like an honest gentleman. Where is your mother? She's basically saying, why are you asking me these questions? Why do you keep switching between the two? You're speaking strangely. And again, this is a reference to the nurse's bawdy sense of humour, very similar to the male characters such as Mercutio, where she's very witty, very clever, very bold in her humour. The nurse says, oh God, ladies dear, are you so hot? Marry, come up, I trow. Is this the poultice for my aching bones? She says, are you this impatient? Come on, you're being ridiculous. Is this how you repay me for running around and making my bones ache? Henceforward, do your message yourself. She says, from now on, you take care of yourself. And again, this is an idea that they're distancing. Maybe the nurse is acting this way because she's sad that Juliet is growing up. Juliet says, here's such a coil. Come, what says Romeo? She says, you're making a fuss. Just tell me what he said. Have you got leave to go to shrift today? I have. She said, do you have permission to go and take confession today? So we've spoken about this before, a very heavily religious time when the play was set. And especially the noble families would engage quite consistently in kind of religious acts, one of them being, going to a confession. The nurse says, then hie you hence to Friar Lawrence's cell, there stays a husband to make you a wife. She says, hurry up and rush over to Friar's cell. They're going to conceal Juliet's marriage by saying that she has gone to take a confession. She says, now comes the wanton blood up in your cheeks. They'll be in scarlet straight at any news. She says that Juliet's blushing. She's blushing like this kind of like a child, almost like an embarrassed child. She says, hie you to church, I must another way to fetch a ladder, by the which your love must climb a bird's nest soon when it is dark. She says, you go to church, I'm going to go and find a ladder so that Romeo can climb up and see you during the night to consummate the marriage. The nurse says, I am the drudge and the toil in your delight, but you shall bear the burden soon at night. Go, after dinner, hie you to the cell. She says, I'll do all of the dirty work for your pleasure, for your delight, but soon you'll be bearing a burden. And then she says, go to dinner. I'll go to dinner, and you go to Friar's cell. And Juliet says, hie to high fortune, honest nurse, farewell. And Juliet is finally feeling joyful. She says, wish me luck, thank you, nurse, and then runs off. And this comment about a burden here, but you shall bear the burden soon at night, is the nurse foreshadowing death? Is that the burden that's going to come from the marriage? Or is she commenting on motherhood and the kind of burdens of being a wife? Okay, so now we've looked at their relationship a little bit more. I would like you to answer these questions in 4 sentences, please. Each of these questions should take about 2 to 3 sentences to answer and approximately 10 minutes to complete. Pause the video and complete these 5 questions now, please. Okay, if you're back, you've got 2 to 3 sentences to answer all 5 of these questions. Now we're going to move on to briefly look at Act 2, Scene 6. So in Act 2, Scene 6, Romeo and Friar Lawrence wait for Juliet, and again the friar warns Romeo about the hastiness of his decision to marry. Juliet arrives, and then they are married by the friar. So this scene is a lot quicker, a lot faster, in direct contrast with Act 2, Scene 5. During Act 2, Scene 5, the audience have had a bit of a comic interlude. They've laughed, they've relaxed, they've had a break, and now they're back into the action with the marriage. Interestingly, we don't actually kind of see the marriage take place, and nor is it that important. But there is an important part of this scene that we want to unpick from our wise Friar Lawrence. He starts the scene talking to Romeo, and then before Juliet enters, he says this. He says, these violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. He says these sudden joys have sudden endings. We all know what that sudden ending is. The sudden joy being love, and the sudden ending being death. And in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. They say that these joys, these delights, burn up in victory like fire and gunpowder. When they meet, as in a kiss, they explode. Quite violent imagery here to describe the kind of love and the results of love in this case. He says, the sweetest honey is loathsome in his own deliciousness, and the taste confounds the appetite. He says, too much honey is delicious, but it makes you stick to your stomach. Therefore love moderately, long love doth so, too swift arrives as tardy as too slow. Love in moderation, that is the key to long-lasting love. Too fast is as bad as too slow. So again, the friar giving this kind of moral message about falling in love too quickly. It almost feels like the friar is privy to some kind of knowledge that he knows that this is going to end badly. We know it ends badly, we know they die, and the friar seems to also understand the implications of this marriage, but he does it anyway because he wants to keep peace. And then Juliet enters. He says, "Here comes the lady, oh so light of foot, will never wear out the everlasting flint." He says, "Our footstep as light as hers will never endure the rocky road of life." That foot will it will not be able to manage the kind of the hardships and the burdens of the road of life, married life. And again, it seems to be hinting at quite a quick decline for Juliet. He says, "A lover may bestride the gossamers that idles in the wanton summer air, and yet not fall so light in vanity." He says that lovers are so light they can walk on a spider web, floating in the summer air. That's how flimsy and unreal pleasure is. The description of their love as flimsy, I think, is quite accurate. We know Romeo is quite fickle and flimsy and flexible in love. And again, it seems like the friar is giving some words of wisdom here. So I would like you to pause the video now and copy the first 2 lines into a mind map. So you want to copy these 2 lines here into a mind map in the center of a clean half page. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so you should have got those lines into a little mind map. Now I'd like you to annotate around it to analyse this quotation. Considering all of our normal things, ideas, any key words you want to draw out, any methods you want to draw around, the tone in which this quote was said. But also I'd like you to consider these questions. What does the explosive imagery in those opening lines suggest? How is this foreboding? How does he compare the feud and their love? What does this foreshadow? And what does this suggest about the friar? So pause the video and spend about 10 to 15 minutes really unpicking this quote apart in detail. Okay, if you're back, you've got your mind map completed, and for the last time you are ready to submit your work. Please make sure your subject looks like this and attach a clear image of your work. I will be checking these to make sure that you are ready to keep on moving with the play later on this week. Well done, guys, for all of your hard effort this term, and I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Take care.